So a warm welcome to you, to all of you in the room from the Geneva Learning Foundation. I'm Min Zha. My guests for today's lightning chat are Michela, Manna, and Shirin Heidari. Both of them are gender experts working for the World Health Organization headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland. We know you're busy. This is why we invented the lightning chat. It only takes 15 minutes, and we only extend it if you have more questions. You can decide then if this topic is important for you or not. If it is relevant to your work, then you will find links to learn more. For today, Michela and Shirin's topic is gender and immunization. I am going to ask them the first questions, but I will be looking to you to ask your own questions and share your comments in the chat. So you can raise your hand if you wish to speak. And for the Francophones in the room, we do have French interpreting available. So right now on the screen, you can see how to actually activate that option and hear the session and follow the session in French. Of course, you're welcome to ask questions or share your comments directly in French in the chat. So I'm going to start with the first question. Maybe for Shirin, who joined us, can you tell us, Shirin, why does gender matter if we want to achieve the vision of IA 2030? And just a side note, if you could open your camera and allow us to see you in addition to hearing you, that would be wonderful.
Great, thank you so much, Zha. Very nice to see you all. I'm putting my camera very quickly just to see everybody, but I have to turn it off just for the sake of bandwidth. I know that that could be a problem. So thank you so much for inviting us. It's great to be here. And just to kind of come back to IA 2030, the strategy really aims to understand the barriers, both the direct and indirect ones, to immunization services. And addressing gender will be very important because there are a number of gender-related barriers and issues related to gender equality that can create obstacles to accessing immunization and can reduce immunization coverage. So as such, addressing gender-related barriers will be critical for the success of IA 2030, and also addressing those that are related to health information, resources, decision-making about vaccinations, people experience of health services, and all the other issues related to gender that can come to influence vaccination access, uptake, and coverage.
Thank you very much, Shirin, for explaining the importance of gender for IA 2030. I encourage, if you're in this session, if you have any questions related to gender and immunization, particularly for IA 2030, you're welcome to click on the raise hand button to ask your own questions directly to Shirin and Michela, or just share the questions in the chat and we'll come to you and invite you to speak directly. So next, I want to go to Michela. When it comes to gender in immunization, what is new or different with IA 2030 as compared to the times when IA 2030 was not created?
Thanks. Yeah, here I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for these questions. Yeah. So as Shirin said, addressing gender-related barriers to immunization is extremely important if we want really to immunize and reach every child. And Immunization Agenda 2030 clearly recognize that. This is really important because for the first time we are saying that we need to implement gender responsive immunization programs, and that's extremely important. As you know, under the priority area coverage and equity, for example, we know that IA 2030 focuses on ensuring an equitable vaccination coverage of girls, boys, women, and men. even though, of course, gender is an important consideration for all the 7 strategic priorities of the Immunization Agenda 2030. There is a clear mention to the need of collect and analyze sex disaggregated data. This is another important aspect of the Immunization Agenda 2030. So really a clear focus on gender, which is new and important. Thanks, and over to you.
Thank you, Michela. I see our first question coming from Samuela Mirage. He asked, is IA 2030 gender sensitive towards beneficiaries or towards FLWs, or the health service providers? Michela or Shirin, which among you, who among you would like to take this question?
I can take that or start, and Shirin, of course, can add. I mean, gender responsive means gender responsive in general, and ideally, when we implement a gender responsive programming, we are responding and we are taking into account the needs and the different needs of men and women, boys and girls, but also of the immunization service providers. And so in doing that, we have also to take into account the need of health workers. So ideally a gender responsive programming in, let's say, covers all these areas.
Thank you very much, Michela. I hope Samuela Mirage, I hope that answered your question, and feel free to come with further follow-up questions if that's not satisfactory. My next question, I would like to turn to Shirin. So we hear a lot, or we start to hear in the immunization space about gender mainstreaming, the word gender mainstreaming. What does it actually mean? Can you share and explain it a little bit, and then share some good examples with us, Shirin?
Great, thank you so much. And that's also relevant to the previous question that was raised by the participant. So gender mainstreaming is a process of really assessing and evaluating the implications of any interventions for women and men, girls and boys, to really understand where are the differences in terms of need, access, and opportunity. It refers really to a strategy for making women and girls, as well as men and boys, concerns and experiences an integral dimension of the design and implementation, monitoring and evaluation of any programs or policies that are supposed to be serving the community, and making sure that men and women, girls and boys can have equal benefit from these services and these policies, and making sure that also that inequality is not perpetuated. And as such, we do need often to start with the gender analysis to really understand where are the differential experiences in terms of gender for women and men, girls and boys, where are the gender-related barriers and obstacles. And as such, related to the previous the question that Michela very eloquently answered as well, we are looking at how these barriers take place. Some of them are related, as we said, is a demand-related barrier. That means that there are barriers that it has to do with the beneficiaries and what obstacles they experience. Some of them are supplier related barriers. That means that there are something in the programs and in terms of service provision, whether it could be, service providers themselves, or kind of how the interventions or the immunization programs are delivered, that can create additional barriers. So in that sense, gender mainstreaming takes into account all possible gender-related aspects. And again, one example is looking at religious and cultural norms that can influence women's mobility and as such their access to services. Or it can be also that they frame or influence what interactions between men and women are allowed, and that can be related to also, that will be also related to the gender of the providers and the gender of the recipients and the beneficiary, and whether to that extent that will be creating an obstacle to accessing immunization. such as in Nigeria, for example, unrelated men may not speak to women without permission from their husbands. In polio eradication activities, women frontline workers have increased the effectiveness of immunization delivery, as in many settings, only women can access household and can vaccinate children inside. Women social mobilizers have improved attitudes towards polio vaccination and the perception of risk associated with the disease. And again, Michela is much more expert in polio vaccination, and these are examples that she can provide more insights about. So all male vaccinator teams, which comes back to the gender of the providers, can be in certain settings be less effective or posing critical gender-related barriers to vaccination efforts.
Thank you very much, Shirin, for giving us that a very clear definition and explanation of gender mainstreaming. We have lots of questions coming in the chat. And if you're just joining us for this lightning chat, we are talking about gender and immunization with Shirin, Heidari, and Michela Manna from WHO. So I would like to go to the questions in the chat. There are 3 of them I can see. The first one comes from Rohula Habib, who asked, does the data reveal the reasons for low coverage, especially to women? And I think the related question asked by Desjeunes, I think incorporation of gender issue in IA2030 is a great move. With regard to immunization program, is there desegregated evidence that we need to know? If yes, can you share those evidences to read them? And so that, Shirin and Michela, maybe you can tackle that question in one go. And then I see a very interesting question coming from Esther Nasike, and we'll come to her question in a moment. Shirin and Michela, who among you would like to address that question on data and desegregated evidence?
I can take that, and of course Shirin can complement. Well, first of all, thank you very much for this very interesting question. So regarding wait, was the first one on data? It depends on which kind of data we're looking at. So if we're looking at quantitative data, maybe there we can find discrepancies, and we can find that maybe there, in some contexts, there are more zero-dose girls, or in some others we see that there are more zero-dose among boys. Then the difficult things, it's we have this picture, but we don't know exactly why this is happening. And that is when we need qualitative data to help us understanding why we are seeing these discrepancies. And so the importance of complementing quantitative data with qualitative data, it's really it's really important. But the sex disaggregation data, that's why we also emphasize a lot the need to collect and analyze sex disaggregated data, because those data can provide us some preliminary information, and they can tell us maybe there is a problem there, maybe not, but maybe there is, and this is where then we start to analyze further to see whether there actually is a problem. And then we need, focus group discussion. When we talk about qualitative data, we talk about focus group discussions, gender analysis, and so on. So I don't know if Shirin want to add anything, but that would be to tackle the data related question. Thanks.
Nothing to add.
Wonderful. Esther's question, I want to highlight. She said, I can't speak directly, but my question is, IA2030 gives a lot of legroom for countries to determine the right course of action in addressing immunization challenges, including those that are gender related. Is that not a challenge when you have gender-blind API programs that are not collecting, for example, sex desegregated data? How best can we build political will around this? Shirin, Michela?
That's a very good question, and Michela can definitely add. I think the whole idea with IA 2030 is really to encourage countries when they're developing their national immunization plans to make sure that in that plan they have incorporated gender in a way that they can also make sure that they can collect the relevant disaggregated data and the relevant indicator. And that is really critical, because without knowing where you are, where are the gaps, where are the barriers, you will not be able to adjust and adopt and modify your interventions and your services to be able to overcome these. And I think, again, comes back to data. If you're creating the evidence that's an important consideration for your immunization programs, you can also use that evidence to build that political will. So it is, again, a circular problem where you need the data to build a political will, but at the same time, you might also need the political will to make sure that you can develop gender sensitive programs and collect that data. But the capacity will be important to at least try to collect data through any kind of a routine programs as you can, or also conduct research that can really provide that evidence to you. And Michela, please share from your experiences.
Thanks, Shirin, and I really agree that's a really good and important question, actually. I agree with you, Shirin. It's really a number of factors that play a role. As we know, and as Shirin said, we need evidence, but unfortunately we know that sometimes evidence it's not enough, and then is where the political will plays a role. Political will can come from different what I would say from different angles. So if maybe we're talking of an organization, if it's the case of WHO, maybe the mandate or the ask to incorporate gender in national plans maybe can come from, if we're talking about maybe a regional office, it can come from headquarters, but sometimes also donors can play an important role in also asking for an improvement in gender programs. It depends, of course, on which program we're talking about. But agree that it's a lot of factors that play an important role in prioritizing gender.
Thank you very much, Michela and Shirin. And Esther, I hope that answer to some extent your question, and I really encourage you to further reflect on this very important and interesting issue. We have more questions coming up. I think the following two questions maybe are related. So there's one question from Ogwu Fanny, who asked, are there measures for evaluating immunization agenda centrally, despite the fact that the program is country-owned? So in today's lightning chat, I would assume, Ogwu, that you're talking about gender-related aspects of the IA 2030. And then the follow-up question from Rohula Habib, can we have qualitative data from the monitoring to show the details about the reasons? So Shirin and Michela, I think these two questions are really about the evaluation and monitoring, and go back to that data issue in terms of the global level monitoring and evaluation. Who among you would like to maybe explain or share some of the things that you're doing with the monitoring and evaluation?
Yeah, thanks. I can try maybe to ask, and then Shirin, of course, will complement if I'm missing important information. But other very important questions. So measures for evaluating well the agenda centrally. Well, the important thing is to I'm like, in my opinion, from my experience, to agree on, for instance, key performance indicators that that can be collected also at country level. So country level is contributed to key performance in indicators that then are also evaluated at the central level. So that would be a way to contribute, you know, the country implementation contribute to the monitoring and evaluation of the agenda also at central level. Regarding the other questions, can we have quality data from the monitoring to show? Well, yes, here again, you have to set indicators that will need qualitative data to be monitored. You know, normally qualitative indicators are about more about, I don't know, like perceptions, reasons. You know, you don't measure, you know, numbers or and so you have to set your indicators in a way that you would need qualitative data to monitor that indicators, and that so you will be you will have to carry out qualitative research to monitor. I hope that helps to answer the question, but please, Shirin, add. Feel free.
Thank you so much, Michela. Now I can add regarding the qualitative part, that I think that's really important, because gender-related barrier can be very contextual. So you really need to understand what are the reasons, what are the conditions, what are the norms, what are the rules, what are the expectations that creates those gender-related barriers, what are the gender inequality issues. For that, you really need more qualitative data, and to what extent they can be collected by monitoring and evaluation. You can always complement that with doing dedicated research, to creating community dialogues and, you know, qualitative research, focus group discussions, interviews, to really capture the nuances and the diversity of experiences that creates these barriers. So I usually strongly recommend that, in addition to a quantitative gender analysis at the beginning of any kind of developing any interventions, to actually also carry out qualitative research and qualitative interviews to understand really where are these barriers coming from, what are the norms, what are the rules, what are the issues within that community, to be able to address them effectively and also collaboratively with the community itself.
Thank you very much, Shirin and Michela. For those of you who are interested in the IA2030 monitoring and evaluation, I also just share a link in the chat. The framework for monitoring and evaluation, there is a document detailed many of the components of this framework. So I encourage you to go through that and really think about, as Shirin said, it's very contextual. How are you going to measure and monitor gender-related aspects in your context? There is one comment I want to highlight from Min Zha. In Bangladesh, all immunization data are already collected and analyzed in a gender segregated manner. We are 6 minutes away from finishing this session. I still have 2 questions for Shirin and Michela. This one is for Michela. So we know that Shirin just explained gender mainstreaming to all of us. Can you share some of the risks of not mainstreaming gender in immunization programs? Michela?
Oh, sorry, I was mute. Apologies. So I was saying that, as also Shirin explained, gender mainstreaming is about taking into account, you know, the different needs of men and boys, and as we're talking about immunizing children, also girls and boys. If we do not take those aspects into account, if we implemented gender blind programs, we risk really to miss the reasons behind refusals in our case, behind zero-dose children, and so we really risk to like tackle the real reasons behind this phenomenon, but also we risk to perpetuate gender inequality, harmful practices, and really not to take into account also, getting back to the question at first, the needs of the health workers that are also implementing those immunization programs. They are also part, of these these programs. It's not about, not only about children we need to vaccinate. There are people vaccinating these children. We also have to take into account their needs. So yeah, I think it's those are the risks of gender blind programs.
Thank you, Michela. My final question goes to Shirin. To health workers in the front line who are directly serving the communities and dealing with gender-related barriers, what would be your advice, Shirin, to help them do their work in a more gender-responsive way? Shirin?
Thank you so much. I think it's really important just to put your gender lens on and be aware of those. Again, having a conversation with community, making sure that we are collecting data that are sex disaggregated, that we have gender sensitive indicators, that we can regularly review and assess to really identify where are the gaps, whom are we not reaching, or who are not being, which children are not being vaccinated, and what can that depend on. Trying to have a conversation with the community to understand those barriers and understand to what extent those are gender-related barriers and which ones can we address through change of interventions, change of approach, and which ones needs to be changed by involving and engaging community. I think it's really needs a continuous effort and engagement, really thinking about these issues and having an open mind to really capture the gender-related aspects. And again, comes back to regularly collect data, but also regularly analyze them. It's not only enough to collect the data. It's sometimes really important to regularly look at the data with a gender lens and see where are we seeing issues, where are we seeing under coverage or suboptimal access to immunization, and really trying to understand what that can depend on and where gender could play a role.
Thank you very much, Shirin. There are still questions coming up in the chat. However, due to time limit, in fact, we can see that it's a gender immunization is a topic of interest for all of us here today. We're stopping right now, but this is only the beginning. If gender matters to you for where you work, the communities that you serve, you can continue to explore, engage, and learn about this important topic through the future lightning chats, as well as the other events. I am showing on my screen the upcoming lightning chats. You can see that next Tuesday we have a session on zero-dose agenda, but right after that, on Wednesday, we will meet Michela and Shirin again to discuss gender and immunization. That will be the final lightning chat on gender on this topic. And I encourage you, if you are doing the Cohort 2 IA2030 course, you have this schedule, encourage you to really block the time there so that if you go back after today's call and you have further questions, come back to and pose them to Shirin and Michela. So with that said, I want to thank you to everyone who joined us today, and thank you for all the very interesting questions. And of course, thank you to Shirin and Michela. We'll see you again next Wednesday. Thank you, Shirin and Michela, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot, and bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.